If you want to be more strategic in HR, but you're struggling to make the time for it because you're just so busy at work, or it could be that you're not really sure how to go about being more strategic, then OKRs might be one of the most useful frameworks that you can use. In this episode of HR Coffee Time, I'm going to show you how objectives and key results, or OKRs for short, can help you and your HR team to focus on what really matters so that you're being truly strategic and able to make an even bigger impact at work without working longer hours. I'm Faye Wallace, and I specialise in supporting HR and people professionals to have successful and fulfilling careers through this HR Coffee Time podcast, my Inspiring HR Leadership Programme, and the Essential HR Planner. It's wonderful to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for tuning in. For this episode, I'll start off with a quick reminder of what being strategic actually means, because I know the idea of it can feel a bit mysterious sometimes. I'll then explain what OKRs are, and I'll share 3 ways that they can help you and your HR team to be more strategic so that you impress everyone you work with and help you make an even bigger and better impact at work. But before we fully dive into the episode, I want to make sure I've said a big thank you to Caroline Dunn for sharing a post on LinkedIn saying that she enjoyed episode 162 of the show, which is called How to Feel More Confident Speaking Up in Leadership Meetings. And I also need to say a second big thank you to Vicky Kearns. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name right, Vicky, because Vicky posted about the podcast again on LinkedIn, recommending another episode to everyone in her network. Also, to everyone who has commented on the YouTube version of the podcast for me, it has just been amazing to see your comments. So thank you so much to everyone. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support. It just is fantastic. Thank you so much. And now let's crack on with the main part of the show with a really quick reminder from episode 163 on what being strategic actually means. If you already know this, you've already heard that episode, then just feel free to skip ahead to the next chapter. I want to share 2 ideas that I found most helpful for understanding what being strategic really means in practice. The first idea comes from Dr. Max McEwen's book, The Strategy Book, How to Think and Act Strategically to Deliver Outstanding Results. In the book, Dr. Max McEwen explains that strategy is fundamentally about shaping the future. So you need to decide what it is you're aiming for in the future and then start working towards it. The second idea about strategy that I have found really helpful, and I hope you will too, comes from Richard Rummelt's book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, The Difference and Why It Matters. Richard Rummelt explains that at the heart of good strategy is a focus on solving the biggest problem that the organisation you work for is facing, and then keeping a laser focus on solving it, instead of getting distracted by lots of other things you could be doing as well. So when you combine these 2 ideas together, you have the perfect recipe for being strategic in HR. It's all about understanding the organisation you work in so you can identify which problem or problems need to be solved to help the organisation succeed, and then figuring out how the HR function can enable the organisation to overcome those challenges, and then create a plan to make it happen so that you're shaping the future. With that in mind, let's move on to talking about OKRs and how they can help. OKRs stand for Objectives and Key Results. They're a goal-setting and alignment framework that started at Intel and were later used successfully by all sorts of organizations, but probably the most famous example is Google. I think it can be helpful to think about OKRs, or Objectives and Key Results, like this. Imagine a fruit bowl, and that fruit bowl represents your organization's overall strategy. So this is the direction it's chosen and the future it's trying to achieve. Let's imagine you work in an organization where the main problem that needs to be solved is low engagement and low performance after a big restructure. So the strategy, or the future that is being worked towards, is to stabilize the business, improve performance, and rebuild trust after a period of change. That's what the fruit bowl represents. Inside the fruit bowl are a small number of oranges, and each orange represents an objective. These objectives are what needs to happen for that future to be achieved. One of the objectives might be to restore clarity and accountability across the organization. That's what one of the oranges in the bowl represents. The other oranges represent other objectives. But let's focus in on this one particular objective, or orange, for me to help bring it to life for you. To achieve the objective of restoring clarity and accountability across the organisation, different teams in the organisation may all be working on this objective in different ways. They will have their own mini objectives that feed into the big overall one. So let's imagine that for this objective of restoring clarity and accountability across the organisation, 4 different departments are going to focus on this: HR, marketing, finance, and tech. So the orange, the objective, gets cut into 4 quarters. 1 represents HR, 1 quarter represents marketing, 1 quarter represents finance, and the final quarter represents the technology department. Each department or function is going to help achieve the overall objective by setting their own objectives. So, for example, HR's objective might be to strengthen clarity and accountability around individual role expectations, while marketing's objective might be to make sure internal and external communications are consistent and joined up. Finance's objective might be to create better visibility of financial performance, and the tech team might have an objective that supports this overall objective, which is to focus on making sure systems, tools, and platforms clearly support how people are expected to work. Hopefully, you can begin to see how powerful it is to have all these different departments pulling together to focus on the same overall objective, the same orange, but all in their own ways. Because for strategy to work, it needs to be truly focused instead of each department working in silos on the things they'd rather work on instead of the things that have been decided are the most important ones to work on. So let's focus on one of HR's orange segments, one of their objectives. We know that each segment of orange has a delicious, juicy inner part that is protected by a section of thick orange peel. That sturdy, protective orange peel represents our key results. Without it, we're in danger of our objectives becoming really messy. The key results are how we'll know that we've achieved the objectives or that we're on the right track to achieving them. You'll usually want to have between 3 and 5 key results. And to make sure they're as good as possible, we need to make sure that they don't just describe activities, but they're specific and measurable. So for our HR objective of strengthen clarity and accountability around individual role expectations, some of our key results could be increase the percentage of employees who say they understand what's expected of them in their role from 60% to 90% in the next engagement survey, or increase the percentage of managers who feel confident holding performance conversations from 50% to 90% within 6 months. And we could have increased the percentage of employees who rate their performance conversations as effective for setting clear expectations and accountability from 40% to 85%. These kinds of measures help HR move beyond we've launched something or we've delivered some training to clearly being able to show how their work is feeding into the organization's overall strategy and helping to achieve it. The key results mean they can show whether clarity and accountability at work are actually improving. And for this example, marketing, finance, and the tech teams would also have key results linked to the same objective that just look different because their contributions are different. The way you and your team achieve the OKRs is up to you. OKRs don't replace project plans, they sit above them. You might decide to have a separate project plan that sets out the activities you're going to focus on in order to achieve the key results. So to follow the example we've been using here, where we want managers to feel confident holding performance conversations and employees to rate those conversations as effective, one of the things the HR team might decide to do is redesign and deliver manager training to build those skills. And they would do that as part of a project plan. So that's one of the actions that might be in their project plan. Now that we've looked at what OKRs are, let's talk about why they are such a helpful framework for HR teams who want to be more strategic. Because what OKRs really do is change the way you think about your work and the way that others see it too. So here are 3 specific ways that OKRs can help you and your HR team be more strategic in practice. The first way is by making sure that your work is clearly aligned to the organization's biggest priorities, to its strategic direction. Instead of HR creating a long list of initiatives based on what feels urgent, OKRs encourage you to start with a different question. What is the organisation trying to achieve right now? And what problems actually need solving? In the example we've been using, the organisation strategy was about stabilising the business, improving performance, and rebuilding trust after a restructure. From that, one of the key organisational objectives was to restore clarity and accountability across the organisation. That immediately gives the HR team some clear anchors. As a team, rather than saying, here's everything we think we should be working on this year, you're saying, this is the organisational challenge we're helping to solve, and here's how our work supports that. That alignment is what makes HR feel strategic to the rest of the business, because it is being strategic. That's why it feels strategic. The second way OKRs help HR be more strategic is by shifting the focus away from activities and towards outcomes. So much HR work gets described in terms of what we're doing. So delivering training, updating policies, rolling out frameworks, whereas OKRs push you to ask a different question. What do we actually want to be different as a result of this work? That's why key results are so important. They move you away from saying things like, we've delivered the training, to we can see whether expectations are clearer and conversations are actually improving. That shift from effort to impact is at the heart of being strategic. The third way OKRs help HR to be more strategic is by supporting prioritisation. OKRs work best when you only have a small number of objectives. That forces choices. When you're clear on what your objectives and key results are, it becomes much easier to decide what deserves time and energy and what doesn't align right now. So instead of saying no based on gut feel alone or feeling bad about saying no, you can push back on other suggestions, ideas, and requests by saying, this is important, but it doesn't directly support the objectives that we've agreed are most critical right now. Being strategic usually isn't about doing more work. It's about doing less, more deliberately. So just to wrap things up, in this episode, we've looked at what being strategic really means in practice and how OKRs can help HR teams move away from reacting to everything that lands on their desk or things that feel important and instead focus on what really matters. We've talked about how OKRs link HR work directly to organisational strategy, how they shift the focus from activity to impact, and how they support better prioritisation, so you can be more deliberate about where your time and energy go. If you'd like to explore OKRs in more depth, I'd recommend a book called Measure What Matters by John Durr, which explains the framework in detail, and he shares lots of real-world examples of OKRs being used. I've also been enjoying the audiobook Radical Focus by Christina Woodke, which uses a fable, a story, to bring the whole idea of OKRs to life in a really accessible way. I'm really enjoying that. And if becoming more strategic is something you want to work on with more support, then I would love to invite you to join my program, the Inspiring HR Leadership Program, where being strategic is a core focus, alongside building your confidence, your influence, your impact, and your credibility at work. Thank you so much for listening or watching today. I'll see you next time on HR Coffee Time when I'm back in 2 weeks with another episode for you.